Good morning, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. So, we all know the deal. We talked about it a little bit last night. We have an enhanced risk issued across a large part of Texas, also sneaking its way into parts of Oklahoma. Shreveport, Louisiana also is involved in this, and a small, tiny chunk of Arkansas as well. Storms are probably going to be firing early to mid-afternoon, I would say. Somewhere between about 1 to 3 central time, I would say. All three hazards are at least slight risk criteria, if not higher. So we do have the 5% tornado risk now added on. We were anticipating that last night, but the formation of storms look a little bit different. We're starting to lean more and more into maybe a little bit of a squall line, or not a bow echo, more so a squall line MCS type deal versus discrete storms, which is somewhat good news in a way, but the wind potential is pretty high with this. We've been looking at soundings for the last day and a half, and I've noticed that there's been plenty of D-cape or downward cape available with these, so it's not surprising to see the hatched risk pop up here with the wind threat. We've already known about the hail threat. We've been talking about it the last day or so. Pretty much anywhere between east of Wichita Falls all the way to just north of the Texas border into Oklahoma here. We have to watch out for that. Austin, you as well need to be on the lookout for hail. It could be some pretty significant hail at that. Been some very impressive analogs. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at the models now. We're going to get an idea of what's going on here. So here is the HRRR. We're finally in good range with that, and we're also on 12Z, so we get 48-hour run here. But when we look at the overall picture here, we're looking at the low-level jet, by the way, which is about 1,000 feet above our heads. Notice not anything super impressive going on with this here, but we do get a little something popping up here, and I think this is going to be where that that enhanced risk for wind exists, and also the hatched risk as well. I wouldn't actually be looking towards where this maximum is, more so off to the east of it for the potential damaging winds and tornadoes, because I think with this setup here, I think the worst of the low-level jet is actually going to be lagging behind just a little bit. At least that's what I'm seeing so far. Even on the fringes of it, it's starting to look like it's a little bit more stable, so we could see a downtrend. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, but we're kind of in just this wait-to-see mode here. The day of often ends up bringing a lot of weird things into play here. I'm just now getting to see this model for the first time, so I'm also kind of clicking through some of these soundings here. But one thing to also note, even when I click through these soundings, you have to remember, and I have to remind myself this too, that these are not psychic. They can give you an idea of what the atmosphere can do, but it doesn't guarantee that that's exactly what's going to happen. But anyway, this is what the low-level jet's looking like for this setup tonight. Like I said, a lot of it's timing-based, and timing-wise, just at least based off the HRRR, not a super impressive setup. Not as impressive as it was before, that's for sure. So overall here, I'm actually going to go ahead and take a look at the composite reflectivity. We'll get an idea of when these storms are set to fire here. Also, one other thing I want to mention is when I was looking towards Oklahoma City a couple of days ago for the potential severe weather, did not see this MCS coming into play here, so this might very well be the reason why some parts of Oklahoma don't see much of anything today. Or if you do see storms in that region, it's going to be relatively unimpressive if they even form over there at all. That being said, potential for severe does still exist, albeit the HRRR has it a little less impressive. If we look at other models like the NAM, we could be talking a different story here. But if we did that, we'd probably be here for hours. So that being said here's that line of storms developing. And this is about 7, 8 o'clock-ish Central Time. This is when the line looks its most impressive. And this is when I think damaging wind potential is going to be at its highest. Because this kind of has that look of a small bow echo trying to develop. I don't think it quite makes it to that status. but it's a very impressive squall line nonetheless, and you can see a little bit of everything in here. This does start to fizzle out by the time we get into the overnight here, so this doesn't become a concern too far after midnight. We still get plenty of thunder and lightning out of it, probably a little bit of hail, but the worst of the damaging wind tornado threat will probably be over by this point. I still have my eyes on tomorrow, by the way, because there's been talk of a potential squall line developing here, maybe even a Boeco derecho type event, which would be really interesting to see unfold across this region. You don't typically see those in June across this area. It's usually more so towards the northern states, so it's pretty interesting to see even the potential existence of that. That being said here, let's go ahead and look at some of the parameters here for today's event. We aren't going to focus too much on tomorrow until the morning. But as far as Cape is concerned, Cape still looks relatively explosive, but definitely a different look than what we were seeing yesterday. We're still seeing areas where we could see up to about 4,500, maybe even 5,000 joules Cape, but this is at the mixed layer. This isn't the surface, so the surface Cape usually tends to be higher. Still getting above 5,000 here, and here's a tour sounding right here. But as a whole, though, this isn't like the most incredible setup I've seen, especially on the kinematic side of things, which is pretty much the wind profile that I'm talking about here. So as a whole, the Cape is still existent. Lapse rates are still going to be existent there. Oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Yeah, the lapse rates are still going to be existent, though, in this case. We're in the 7s and the 8s here pretty easily across this region here, which is more than sufficient enough to produce some big-time hail, maybe a couple of tornadoes. But the real story is the downward Cape, which is going to be a big factor as far as damaging winds are concerned. So we'll click another sounding here in just a second. And when we look at the D Cape here, I don't know if you can see that number. Wish I could zoom in a little bit more, but to put it in perspective for you, if you see D Cape above 1,000, usually that's a pretty good indicator of damaging wind potential. I'm seeing 1786, so we're getting close to almost 1.5, well, actually over 1.5 times the proper indicator, so to speak, of there being increased damaging wind threat. Hence why the 30% and the hatch risk exists today. So pretty dangerous storms on the table here for Texas. Whether or not they produce tornadoes today or not, definitely want to make sure you're regarding those warnings, taking them serious, because these storms will mean business today. They have the setup for them to do so, whether they produce tornadoes or not. So that being said, it's about the end of this video here. If you liked what I did here, you already know what to do. Smash that like button, decimate that subscribe button, and face kick that share button. It's a little bit of metal lingo for you guys, for those of you that like to mosh, that is. Anyways, though, this has been Tyre Metalhead Weatherman. I will see you guys a little bit later today. We'll be going live to cover this thing. Until then, have a nice day.